So in the Easter season, it's traditional to hear stories from the book of Acts, which is kind of the story of the early church, the early believers gathering. And the normal text for this Sunday is the one of Saul being converted as he walks down the road to Damascus and is struck by lightning or some force. But I've preached that a lot. And instead, we're going to hear a scripture I've never preached from that doesn't show up in the lectionary. It's the story of Rhoda the slave. And the stories of women, of course, don't get covered a lot in the scripture. They are just not in there as often. We know that just from the way history is told. So it's kind of remarkable, really, that as many stories about women do show up. There's like 5 kind of large parts that women play in the book of Acts, like Tabitha and Lydia, and we'll hear some of those later. But this is really kind of a bit part. And in a way, you would think there's really not enough here to make a sermon. But in the last decade, last 20 years, since I was in seminary 40 years ago when I started, there's been really, a huge burgeoning of feminist scholarship, womanist scholarship, as black women too have come into the field of New Testament and early Christian origins. And so they've done some really imaginative work and kind of expanded the way we understand many of these texts that have been kind of previously looked over. Since I've never preached this would be a better sermon on Wednesday because it's been a lot of study trying to get this in my head. But this is just a short vignette, and then I'll flesh it out during the sermon. As soon as Peter realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark. So Peter has been imprisoned by Herod, the bad guy, and then he's been released kind of divinely by this messenger, by this angel. So he has gone to the house of Mary where the early followers are gathering, and they've been praying for his release or for his safety. Many had gathered and were praying. When he knocked at the outer gate, a slave named Rhoda came to answer. On recognizing Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the gate, she ran in and announced that Peter was standing at the gate. And they said to her, "You are out of your mind." But she insisted that it was so, and they said, "It is Peter's angel." Meanwhile, Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the gate, they saw him and were amazed. And he motioned to them with his hand to be silent, and described for them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he added, "Tell this to James and to the believers." And then Peter left and went to another place.